Hello, I'm an old fart, and I have a guilty pleasure. I like knives. I'm not an expert or an official representative of anything or anyone in any way. I just like knives. Today, this tour of my collection of small folding pocket knives is going to look at this. This is a Reeve Sebenza Model 31 small version. Why this knife? Well, you know how when you're looking at a field or collecting something, there are certain brands and models that just become iconic. They become standards that other things are measured against. The Sebenzas are certainly one of those. You hear people saying, this is almost like a Sebenza, almost as smooth as a Sebenza, almost as well-fitting as a Sebenza. So when I started getting into collecting knives, it didn't take me very long before I realized I had to have one of these things. It's just one of those must-have list items. And I was eventually given an opportunity to pick up this one. This is the small model, as I said, and it is with wood inlays. The wood is bog oak. So when I got it home and opened it up, I must admit for the first 30 minutes or so, I was a little bit underwhelmed. I mean, it's nice. And I opened it and I said, oh yeah, that opens nicely, and oh, it's a knife. It can cut things. And my answer was maybe just a little bit ho-hum. And I think I had allowed the hype to give me unreasonable expectations. I think I expected the heavens to open and choirs to sing and lose weight and get notified that I had just won a lottery and a bunch of other things like that. And but then it grew on me quickly. It only took a few times opening and closing it and using it to actually cut things to fall quite in love with it. And now, like is supposed to happen with these reference models, I find myself comparing everything else to this. In fact, it kind of made me want more, and I've managed to add a couple of other Chris Reeves to my collection, which we'll tour at another time. It became something that I sort of trot out when I'm talking to curious non-knife people, because one of the things that they often ask when they hear that I collect pocket knives, aside from what's the matter with you, is, so what's your best? What does really good look like? And this is the one I often bring out to show them what that looks like. I picked up a user of this model too, without the wood inlays, so that I can kind of baby this one and beat the hell out of the other one. And they are a good, sturdy, hard use knife. So let's do some descriptions. The blade is, I don't have my calipers handy, but oh well, the blade is 2.9 inches long. So it's under that magic 3-inch boundary that is important in some places. That defines what you're allowed to carry in certain places. So good for that. Closed, it is pocketably small, but not tiny. It fits in the pocket well. Fills the hand nicely when you're holding it. So it's a good size on the compact end of the scale. So to show the size by some comparisons, I think the most important one is the pocket calculator scale. It's becoming one of my favorites for showing the size of a knife. So I've just lined it up here, and you can see that it is 0.95 pocket calculators in length. I hope that's a useful size comparison. Now it is kind of standard to also compare knives to other knives, and so I guess I'll give in and do a bit of that too. So the most obvious thing to compare it to would be this. This is a small Sebenza, so here's the large Sebenza. And as you can see, it is considerably smaller than the large Sebenza. So it is a small knife compared to this. Or this is a big knife. Think of it whichever way you like. On the more compact knife end of the scale, it's still smallish, so it's smaller than the zero tolerance 0.45, just a little bit. Much smaller than a 940. Interestingly, if you go into knives that are advertised as being compact, so the Mini Griptilian, for example, Now we see it's just a little bit larger than a mini Griptilian. Trying to find something that's the same size as led me to this one. It's pretty much exactly the same size as a TRM Neutron. Very different knives, but very much the same size. So that gives you some ideas about size. For the weight, I don't know what the weight is. I don't have a scale and I didn't look it up, but go look it up. Duh. But I'll say it's light, but not a featherweight. There's a lot of metal in there, but the metal is mainly titanium. So it's not heavy in that it weighs down your pocket or stretches your pants. It's not a weight that you're tired holding. It rides very lightly in the pocket, but there's some heft there. The mechanism is, of course, what the Sebenzas are famous for, that of the blade. It's a thumb stud opening mechanism. It has a cone-shaped thumb stud that some reviewers hate. I don't hate it. First of all, I think it's pretty. It's a little unusual and pretty. And it discourages flicking the knife. If you try to do a spidey flick, your thumb kind of slides off the stud. And that's by design. Chris Reeve does not want you flicking their knives open. They say that their knives are designed to be opened sort of slowly and deliberately, and this thumb stud encourages that. This particular stud is one-sided, as you can see. The hole does penetrate all the way through the blade, and you can get two-sided studs for some of the Chris Reeve knives. On this, the small, the two-sided would not really allow you to open it left-handed because it would be pretty crowded in there. I think I would, anyway, have trouble getting any substantial amount of my thumb or finger meat in there under the stud if there was one on this side. So I don't really think on the small that the double-sided thumb stud would add much value. I'll just point out that on the large, it is a useful thing. It allows you to do a two-finger open if your knife is set stiff. But even there, it's not that easy to get in there to do a left-handed open. There is, on the other hand, a fully left-handed version of the knife available. That's one of the nice things about a more expensive knife is their volume isn't, or their profit isn't based on volume. So they can take the time to retool and run an alternate layout. So you can get a fully left-handed version of the knife. It is a frame lock. In fact, it would be more correct to say it's the frame lock. The official patented name for that locking mechanism is the Reeve integral lock. Chris Reeve invented the frame lock, so it's no surprise that they do it so well. On these models, the lock surface is not just the end of the lock bar. There is a ceramic ball in there, which you can just see if I line this up. There we are. You can just see the ball protruding from the end of the lock bar. That's what makes contact with the locking surface on the blade. And because it's a ball, it's able to slide smoothly up against the blade. And the result is that you get an incredibly firm lock, no matter how fast you open the blade. On some knives, I find that if you open the blade too slowly and gently, you only get a partial lock, and you have to kind of fling it open to get a full lock. And not so on this knife. You can open it as slowly as you like, clunk, and you get that beautiful clunking sound and a really good lock engagement. You can see there it's well past 50%, and it just doesn't seem to be possible to have less lock engagement than that. I have heard people use the term bank vault lock, and I kind of like that because it is that kind of secure, no-nonsense feeling. You do have a lot of confidence that this thing is not going to slip. Now, of course, because it locks, boy does it lock, there are places where it would be illegal, places where you're not allowed to have locking knives. So for you, sorry. Chris Reeve does make one non-locking knife, by the way, that I don't have one, but from what I've seen has a lot of the same fine fit and finish. So that'll probably make its way into the collection eventually. The blade on this particular model is a drop point. There are other shapes available, but I really like drop points, so that's the one I've chosen. And there is a large radius hollow grind. I just sort of play with the angle and the light there. You can see this surface of the blade is not flat, it's curved. And what it is a very large radius grind that has imparted a gentle curve in there, leading up to the sharpened bevel. It's very beautiful, and it cuts nicely because you have a very thin blade just behind the live edge, and then it gradually thickens out in a way that helps force apart the material that you're cutting. So I think it's a beautiful blade to look at, and it certainly performs very well. Worth pointing out, the back of the blade is beautifully rounded as well. It's not a square finish, but just a lovely machined round surface that makes it very comfortable to hold and to work with. Now, on the other hand, you're not going to scrape a fire steel with that. And honestly, who would? It's kind of making me shudder thinking about scraping a fire steel with this beautiful knife. I suppose if you were in a survival situation and this was the only knife you had, you could scrape a fire steel with the jimping, but I would probably use my teeth before I did that. The body has a variety of styles available, from pure titanium to wood or micarta inlays. This inlay is called bog oak, which I'm pretty sure is what we used to call petrified wood. And it's very pretty. It's hard, has a nice interesting grain pattern, and of course, being a natural product, they're all a little different, so it makes the knife a little bit unique. It needs maintenance. Reeve recommends waxing the wood surfaces occasionally, and I enjoy doing that, actually. I enjoy the feeling of rubbing and polishing the wood, and I love the smell of the wax, so I don't mind that maintenance at all. I like the approach to the metal on this knife. It's a titanium frame, but the titanium is finished in two different ways. You can see, again, I'll just get some light reflecting. You can see on the main surface of the knife here, this titanium surface is polished. It's not quite a mirror, a satin finish, but mirror-ish, whereas the edges are raw titanium, a sandblasted finish, as is the clip and the lock bar. So there's two different finishes of titanium here, the polished and the raw, and I find that's attractive. It makes the knife interesting to look at. Speaking of the clip, there's a clip. It goes into the pocket quite well. I find it quite easy to slip over the edge of my pants, and that's because of this quite large lead-in edge on the clip here. Now, because of that large lead-in edge, this does stick up a little bit when it's sitting in your pocket, and I'm sure that eventually I'm going to catch it on something, but that hasn't happened yet. It holds well. It's easy to get in and out. Now, it is a shallow carry clip. You can see the insertion point stops there. And I generally prefer deep carry clips on knives, and I've added deep carry clips to several knives that didn't come with them. So I tried that here. I ordered a third-party deep carry clip that is properly sized to fit in the machined recess there, and I didn't like it. It just kind of spoiled the lines. This thing is so beautifully designed and such a nice integrated design that I didn't really like the change over to the deep carry. So I put it back on, and I'm living with the shallow carry. On this knife, I think that's what it needs to be. So let's run through some likes and don't likes. What do I like about this knife? Well, honestly, it's kind of a shallow thing to say, but I just take great pride in owning such a beautiful piece of work and such a reference piece. The attention to detail is incredible. It is a perfect example of careful, close tolerance machining. And basically, it's why I collect knives, is to collect fine machinery like this. You take it apart and reassemble it, which I've done. Everything comes back together, still perfectly aligned, perfectly centered, beautifully operating. And in fact, Reeve knives come with the tools necessary to disassemble them, so it's not discouraged. The opening and locking mechanism, I love. As I said, it opens slowly. You get that loud clunk and a solid lock. It's not designed to flick. CRK calls that opening hydraulic. Again, I think that's a good word. I just never get tired of that. It's just a fidget spinner. I just open and close it all day long. And it gets better with use, by the way. I like the blade. I've already mentioned that I like the shape, the large diameter hollow grind, the drop point. I also like the edge a lot. One thing, and simple, but just attention to detail, is the edge is perfectly symmetrical. The amount of sharpened bevel is exactly the same on both sides. So I didn't feel any need to reprofile the blade, which I often do on cheaper knives. It bothers me that the bevel isn't the same on both sides. Not a problem on this knife. It came very sharp. Not mirror sharp, bragging sharp. I can see the grit, the grind on that. But plenty sharp, paper cutting sharp, sharp enough to use, and I'm not feeling the urge to resharpen it. Once I do feel the urge to resharpen it, it's S35 VN steel, which sharpens easily and should hold a good edge. There's a good-sized sharpening choil, so it should be no problem to get a stone all the way to the edge without encountering interference from the thumb stud. Which is good because as far as I can figure out, the thumb studs are not removable. So I like the blade. The clip. I like the fact that the clip is canted. It's not parallel with body, but at a bit of an angle, because that means that the clip is not resting on the lock bar. It is resting on the frame. It's not pressing on the lock bar, which means it isn't making the knife harder to open. And I really like that. Not only is it not pressing on the lock bar, but the clip acts as a kind of a fence to make it harder to accidentally press on the lock bar with your fingers. Again, just making it easier and smooth to open. I like the fit. Fits nicely in my hand. I get a full 4-finger grip just because it is small. This opening that is really there for purposes of accessing the locking mechanism serves as a nice finger groove, and there's some very comfortable jimping on the back for the thumb, so I get a good, secure grip. The body, we've already mentioned the wood inlays. They're quite beautiful. They're interesting. I like that mix of polished and unpolished titanium. And in fact, one of the things I kind of like about it is you can see the Chris Reeve logo here, which I don't know if you can see it, but it is engraved into the titanium. And because the flat is polished and the interior of the logo is not, it comes out looking a little darker. And I just think that's very elegant and understated. So I like a lot about this knife. So what don't I like? Well, there is very little I don't like, but just for the purpose of having a list, I'll mention a couple of things. First, there's a lanyard on this knife. It's not the one that came with it. It does come with a lanyard. And I didn't like the lanyard that it came with very much. It was much heavier cord and quite short. And I didn't really see the point of it. It wasn't long enough to really change my grip on the knife or anything. And it was because it was quite short, it didn't move very freely, and I didn't like it very much, and I removed it. And boy, that was a mistake. And after doing some research, I discovered that this is a known thing. If you take the lanyard out, the pin that it's going through, which is free turning, rattles. And boy, was that bothering me, that my expensive, high-tolerance, gorgeous knife was rattling when I shook it. So I put a lanyard back in, and I made it a little longer while I was at it, so that it's a little more full hand. That seems odd to me, that in such a high-tolerance knife, a rattle would be a concern. Now, the official recommendation from Chris Reeve is that if you remove the lanyard, take the pin out, and you can take the pin out. I am not convinced I want to do that because it'll leave a hole. I do like it being filled, and I find the gold color of the pin is actually quite attractive. So for now, anyway, I'm keeping the lanyard. The other thing I'll list to not like, and boy, are we getting picky now, is that the polished blade fingerprints quite badly, especially around here, because that's the area my thumb touches as I'm opening it. I'm almost always having to polish, of course I don't have to. I'm almost always feeling compelled to polish the blade, to take those fingerprints off and just keep it at its peak beauty. Talk about small complaints, but the knife is just that good. So next, let's run through my internationally unknown knife rating systems. First, the NTGK rating, which is, of course, for non-threatening gentleman's knife. For non-threatening, is the shape scary? And I'd say no. It's not too large. It's very handsome. Elegant frame, elegant scales. And there are no stupid, weapony looking hype markings on it. It's just a tool. Now it is, on the other hand, slightly stabby looking. So the blade is not tiny and it's very pointy, so it might make people nervous being a blade. But I would say in general, no, the shape is not scary. I'd give it an A for that. Is the opening mechanism scary? I would say no, very much not. First of all, you can open it two hands. So if I'm in front of somebody who's very nervous, you can open it two-handed, which is much less scary than, for example, a flipper, which opens invisibly fast, and they go, switchblade! So two-handed opening is good, and even on the one-handed opening, it's slow and deliberate and just safe-looking. And it's easy to say that, the reason I have this thing, the reason I collect knives is because it's such a fine piece of machinery. And that seems to diffuse fear of knives a little bit too. On GK as a gentleman's knife, I'd score it an A+ there. I mean, it's elegant shape, elegant action, elegant wood inlays, very pocketable, easy to get in and out of my suit pants without ruining them. The lanyard helps with that a little bit. The only negative on gentleman's knife is the shallow carry clip, but I can live with that. So I'd give it a high score there as well. So overall, as an NTGK, non-threatening gentleman's knife, I'll score it an A+. My other internationally unknown rating is, of course, the KN rating, which is what would fellow knife nerds think? Well, obviously it's an A+ there. I mean, it's a Sebenza. It doesn't require much justification. There are knife nerds who have a Sebenza and knife nerds who don't have a Sebenza. The ones who don't have one want to handle it because they've always wanted one. And the ones who do have one might have a 21 or a 25, so they're interested in the difference. If they have a 31, then suddenly we're friends, and they want to compare notes and styles and inlays and such things. It's an A+ knife nerd knife. Now finally, after my last tour item of last month, I decided to add one more rating to my rating systems. So here's a new rating. This is going to be my CM rating, which is my cut myself rating. It seems to be part of breaking in a new knife that I have to cut myself on it. So I thought I'd come up with a rating scale on how bad has that been, where A is I haven't cut myself on it, all the way down to F, which is this is really stupid, seriously flawed and dangerous. The knife I reviewed last month, which does not completely protect the tip of the blade when closed, would be a D or an F, I'm not sure which. So this one, I have not cut myself on, so it's going to get an A. I've handled it a lot, so I don't know whether I'm not cutting myself because it's just so well designed, or am I not cutting myself because I'm just handling it with such love and care. But in any case, for whatever reason, it gets an A. So, in summary, what can you say? The Sebenzas are generally considered the finest production knives, and I agree. Sebenza is a verb and a comparison standard. It's gorgeous. I love owning it. I love handling it, caring for it, using it. I will mention that there are some who say no knife is worth that price. And my response would be, okay, you're welcome to your opinion, but I think you're wrong. At least, for my collecting niche. Maybe there's another collecting niche, which is about kind of value, about, joy per dollar or cutting goodness per dollar. good value knives. And maybe this wouldn't be top of the list there. But I'm not pretending that that's me. I'm collecting based on pleasure of ownership and love of fine machining, and boy, this is top of the list for that. I'll make a comment. I'll translate this to US dollars, although I'm not in the US, but somebody asked me once, so is this $500 knife better than 5 $100 knives? And I said, without question, yes, it absolutely is. So, thanks for watching. See you again.